There are three muscle fibre types in the body: slow oxidative muscle fibres, fast oxidative glycolytic fibres, and fast glycolytic fibres. Slow oxidative fibres are for low intensity, high duration events, for example a marathon or a triathlon. Fast oxidative glycolytic fibres are for medium intensity but higher duration, for example the 400 or 800 meter race in athletics. Fast glycolytic fibres have a very high intensity but very low duration, for example the 100 meter sprint or the hammer throw. Slow oxidative fibres have a slow speed of contraction. This is due to their smaller neuron diameter. This means that a lower force is generated when they contract. Fast oxidative glycolytic fibres have a medium contraction speed due to their medium diameter of neurons. Due to their medium diameter, a medium force will be produced. Fast glycolytic fibres have a very fast contraction speed. They have a large myelinated neuron diameter. This causes a high force of contraction. Slow oxidated fibres use oxygen, which means they use the aerobic system. They have lots of capillaries and contain lots of hemoglobin and lots of myoglobin. Fast oxidated muscle fibres are both anaerobic and aerobic. They contain some capillaries, some hemoglobin, some myoglobin. However, fast glycolytic fibres are completely anaerobic. They have no capillaries, no hemoglobin and no myoglobin, which means oxygen cannot bind to them. Slow oxidated muscle fibres use lots of mitochondria which are on them. They have aerobic enzymes but no anaerobic enzymes. This helps them with their high duration but low intensity. Fast oxidative glycolytic fibres have some mitochondria. They also have both anaerobic and aerobic enzymes. This differs to fast glycolytic fibres, as fast glycolytic fibres have no mitochondria. They also only have anaerobic enzymes, which means they have no aerobic enzymes. The main energy store of slow oxidated fibres is glucose, fats and sometimes proteins. They are high fatigue resistant due to this. Fast oxidative glycolytic fibres use the glycolytic energy system, which means lactic acid. This means they only use carbs for their energy source. This means they have a medium fatigue resistance. However, fast glycolytic muscle fibres have low fatigue resistance. This is because they produce lactic acid. Their only energy source is ATP-PC. This is the phosphocreatine energy system. The waste product when slow oxidated muscle fibres are used is carbon dioxide, H2O, also known as water, and heat waste. Fast oxidative glycolytic fibres produce lactic acid as their waste product. This is similar to fast glycolytic fibres, as their waste product is also lactic acid. Slow oxidated muscle fibres are normally a more red or pink colour. This is due to the large amount of red blood cells surrounding them. This differs as fast glycolytic fibres are normally a darker colour, as they contain less red blood cells. In a marathon, slow oxidated fibres will be used the most. This is because of their high duration and their high fatigue resistance. During a more intense race, however not a short race like the 400 meters, fast oxidated glycolytic fibres will be used, as they have a medium fatigue resistance, a medium contraction speed, but also medium intensity but high duration. Fast glycolytic fibres are used for only short and powerful events, for example the hammer throw or sprint. 100 meters. This is because they have a low fatigue resistance as it produces lactic acid. However, they are used for power events as they have a fast contraction speed due to their neuron diameter. There are three main parts of muscle contraction. The nerve transmission. This is where the nerve is passed from the brain down the spinal cord and to the muscle. This then causes a reaction from the muscle. The nerve is passed over a neuromuscular junction. This is the junction between the nerve and the muscle, where the impulse has to be passed over. Then, to help the muscles contract, this is the sliding filament theory. This is the process of the muscles shortening in length due to the actin and myosin binding. The neuromuscular junction. This is between the muscle fibers and the neurons. The neuromuscular junction is the gap between the neuron and the muscle fibers. The impulse will be sent down muscle fibers, which are myelinated. This means that the impulse will jump over them by solitary conduction. When the impulse reaches the synaptic vesicle, ACH will be spilt over the synapse. It will then reach a receptive membrane. This will then receive the ACH. This then passes it down into the muscle fibers. When the ACH reaches the receptive membrane, it will then be passed down T-tubules to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. In here, this will release calcium. This is a crucial part to the sliding filament theory. During the sliding filament theory, the myosin will bind to the actin and it will create a shunting movement. The binding site between the actin and the myosin is however blocked. It is blocked by tropomyosin and troponin. This is where the calcium comes in. The calcium will help bind to the tropomyosin and break off the bonds. This will then break down the bonds between the tropomyosin and troponin. This will make the actin and myosin binding site available. The myosin will then consume ATP, which is also a source of energy. This then means it can bind to the actin. Then it will form a cross bridge. This is the bond between the myosin and the actin. Once this has happened, there will be a big movement backwards. This will cause the contraction of the muscle. This means the Z lines will become closer and contract. This whole contraction phase will happen within a sarcomere. There are many different bands of the sarcomere. For example, the Z band is the line that separates each sarcomere. The H zone is the gap between the myosin cross bridge. The A band is a lot thicker as it's where the myosin is contained. The actin is also contained in the band, but this is called the L band as it is a lot thinner. Once the contraction has happened, the myosin will then consume more ATP. This will then break the bond, the cross-bridge bond between the myosin and the actin. It will then return back and then bind to another. The myosin will then go back and bind to another actin. This will make the contraction happen again. This is a repeating process. There are three different types of muscle contraction: isometric, concentric, and eccentric. Isometric contractions are when the distance between the origin and the insertion will remain the same. This is because there is a balanced force between the muscle and the force applied to it. During this, the muscle will still be contracting, but it will remain the same length. This is because the force applied downwards is equal to the muscular force. This means that the weight or mass is the same. The origin and insertion will not move closer or further away. A concentric contraction is when the insertion moves towards the origin. This is because the force that the muscle applies is greater than the force that is applied down on the arm, for example in the bicep. An eccentric contraction is when the origin and insertion move away. This is when the muscle will lengthen. This is due to the force down being greater than the force up. If the movement downwards is controlled, this means there'll be a minimal difference. For example, during a squat, the quadricep on the way up will be a concentric contraction. This is due to the insertion and origin moving closer together. On the way down, the quadricep will also be the muscle involved. It will be an eccentric contraction due to the insertion and origin moving apart. This is on the down phase. When you're holding a squat in a position, the quadricep will be involved in an isometric contraction. This is because the quadricep is not extending or is not contracting.